we are doing an ad hoc video today on the subject of political participation and voting in the UK. It is a hot topic. It's there is some questions, and there's a lot of discussion on the internet around the issue of Gaza. As we know, Gaza has been continuing for over a month, and the stances of the major political parties has shown complete ambivalence, or rather animosity, towards the Muslims in Palestine. They have thrown the Muslims under the bus. They've subverted international law, every kind of underhanded tactic you can imagine. When Bosnia was happening, they turned a blind eye. In this case, it's their ally Israel committing the genocide, and they are completely standing by and supporting Israel at every opportunity and providing them with the moral cover. So we thought it's definitely appropriate to discuss this issue of how we as Muslims can assist, specifically on this subject which has been broached around political participation. And the context of this particular video, Thinking Muslim, the main host for that, Jalaluddin Patel, has made very valid points around penalizing the major political parties. And he's written a document which I will be linking in the description, and it relates to how we as a Muslim community, a collective, can navigate this current climate and deliver some kind of a blow to the major political parties, so that they effectively see that, look, as a Muslim community, you have been traitorous to us, and the repercussions are that you will be unseated in certain specific areas where we do control some sort of a majority. Before I progress, I'll just give an introduction to the professor and then summarize the main points of the work that was produced. Firstly, we've been running these study circles for quite some time now. We've been, personally, I have been a student of Professor Dr. Muhammad al-Massasri for a number of years. And what's unique about our channel and what we're trying to get across is we are building an Islamic concept from the ground up, built on absolute certainty. So the Quran, the Sunnah, as being the bedrock of everything we produce, and building material around that. So there's been the professor himself has written extensively on issues around usul of fiqh. He has his own Kitab Tawheed, which is a flagship work which covers everything from the creed of Islam, everything from the intellectual belief down to the systems that emanate from it. It's effectively a work that redresses the mistakes of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab and his doctrine and his effectively his ideology, which labels vast swathes of Muslims as effective as mushrikeen, and also is inherently flaws and full with contradictions. And at the same time, it's expanding on the work of a great scholar called Sheikh Taqi-ud-Din Bahani of his book Tahrir. And he did a sterling work in his book Systems of Islam. This is effectively addressing any minor errors within that and expanding upon it and building a strong basis on which Muslims can revive their understanding of Islam and progress forward. This isn't unique to the UK. This is globally as an ummah. There are certain things we need to address, and there's things that we need to move forward. The professor himself comes from a scholarly background, originally from Saudi Arabia, Saudi occupied Arabia, from a lineage of scholars on his mother and father's side. His father was a contemporary of Bin Baz and the chief judge in Saudi, himself having been a professor of physics, so is being well equipped to everything, many complex issues around quantum mechanics. And there are material and videos available on those subjects as well as being very well versed on comparative religion and history and usul al-fiqh, and quite a wide gambit there. So our channel is growing. Our channel is we are producing more content. In particular, we're doing a tafsir class. So do subscribe to us because we will be producing a lot of material for your benefit, inshallah, and for the benefit of the ummah. So that's the introduction for the professor. I will briefly go into the main talking points of the text, and then we'll start a dialogue around the points that have been raised, and inshallah, hopefully we should bring some good material out of this. So just to summarize, Muhammad Jalaluddin Patel of Thinking Muslims produced a document to guide the Muslims around this current climate. the main points I've condensed to three, or 3 points were effectively raised. So he addressed the issue of independent candidates, and his impetus behind this is the fact that as a community, it's not possible to decapitate Labour, before anyone misreads that, in terms of from politically. However, we can reduce their majority, in particular in certain key boroughs. So the reason for this is obviously due to their duplicity over Gaza, and it will register disappointment and disapproval of the political class by casting of votes in unison via Muslim independent parties. So he's proposing using Muslim independent parties, which I'll expand upon based off of his document. The idea is to send shockwaves on election nights and effectively penalise Labour and anyone who's taken this traitorous route. The other point he raises is he doesn't think that having a national Muslim party would be a good idea, because effectively it would be easy to label as a fifth column. They can use it as adverse publicity, almost a kind of, see that we told you that they're like this. And exactly what we can see echoes the kind of conditions under Nazi Germany, the kind of rhetoric that's coming out. So this, by us being independent and having this kind of coordinated voice, there is the perception maybe we could effectively be stigmatized in a similar fashion, and you can see the rhetoric itself anyway. So his proposal is to work on local campaigns and working as independents, and he gives the example of UKIP, how they, by campaigning on a specific issue, in their case Europe, they were able to push the narrative. Although they were small in number, ultimately their voice was magnified, and it was they effectively adopted an idea that took on a life of its own by multiple parties. So that's his recommendation around not having a singular party but multiple independents. It also puts it beyond things like scandal, so that they can't effectively just say, okay, this guy's dodgy, and stigmatize us in that way. He also makes a good point around working with the left, how the left is effectively now being seen as a spent fourth. And he makes a good observation around bringing them under our umbrella, under our terms. And just to digress from there slightly, this is actually the case this side of the planet and in America. Often Muslims, it's partly because of a defeated type of mentality whereby we felt that we're inferior, so we have to piggyback off someone else's cause, and that has led to numerous problems, certainly in the American side, in terms of people becoming extremely watered down. So you see, for example, people like Ilhan Omar, where Muslim has just become a label, but the kind of things that they endorse, are just completely beyond the pale of Islam. And we have an example of that in the UK as well, with the SNP leader, which we did a video on, where he was actually advocating gay marriages and things like that, which I don't know if he's changed his stance, because he has had an honourable stance with respect to Gaza, because he has in-laws there. And obviously, I'd like to think that he has that's Islamic sincerity there as well. But yeah, these kind of things are fraught with danger. So the idea behind this being that we dictate our terms, and if there's any working together, it's under our auspices. Okay, so that's effectively the synopsis of the argument. And just to also make something clear as well, this isn't intended to be just a one-off in terms of this is what we're going to say about the subject. We invite dialogue. I did try to tweet a number of people to kind of elicit that kind of response. We were in a bit of a rush to get a video out on this subject, because we thought it's quite important. But hopefully we're more than happy to engage. And if anyone wants to join our podcast, more than welcome. You can always DM me quite easily. I will be linking our contact details in the description. So, Sheikh, I'd like to hand over to you to firstly, off the back of that summary, what your initial thoughts?
Yeah, my initial is that the whole thing, certain points need to be discussed in their own merits, but the whole stand is obviously a reaction to the recent bankruptcy of the left, especially Keir Starmer's stand with complete alliance with the Zionists, because he believes, I think that's his motivation. Maybe he's not a Zionist himself, but he believes that without alliance with the Zionists, he will never reach the power position he wishes to have as a prime minister. And that's the reason he led the rebellion against Jeremy Corbyn. And we know the story. So Mr. Patel, Radha Patel, Jalaluddin Patel, is in reaction to this situation. And this is because, obviously, it seems to be his stand has been like 20, maybe 30 years back, if he has been at that time in voting age. I think he's sufficiently old to be in the voting age. In the 90s, the questions were discussed widely, and it was advocated by Azam Tamimi and some Muslim Brotherhood personality and so on to participate in election and so on, and under the principle what they call power sharing. And at the time, I objected to that. I have a writing called Voting for Kufr. I gave it out of a spicy title, Voting for Kufr is Kufr. Obviously, the article or the essay discusses the details of that. Like this, like what they in modern time call clickbait. It's a clickbait, really, just to get the people to read what's going on there. The detailed argument there inside. The question is that the following: what is the position of a Muslim or Muslim community in a domain where it's ruled by Kufr and the majority are non-Muslims? So they are either being immigrants or they are converted and they are a minority. If you are a minority, then definitely you don't have enough power, because the real power which we perceive by necessity of reason and perception in any domain, which having some definition of being a certain domain, either a kingdom or a republic, it may be emerging historically or defined geographically, like, for example, the UK. Although the UK, the main island is actually always one geographic unit, is actually not a political unit except in recent few centuries. Through histories, there were various kingdoms. There was Wales, there were England were various kingdoms, and then also Scotland was one, or maybe one kingdom, and so on. And there were continuous fights for centuries, and absorption, and rejection, and absorption, and unions, and dissolving of union, etc. And now we have these tendencies in Scotland to separate from this union. So we could say there are three entities, or three nations, which have emerged in the last 3 centuries in England. All this one geographic unit. France is similarly, there's somehow a clear border which emerged over 1,000 of years, roughly 1,000 of years, with so-called France. But it's also, you could say it's actually 2 or 3 different communities there. But let's assume we have something quite homogeneous like Sweden. I don't think it's that extremely homogeneous, but a little bit better, being smaller, and essentially all of them Nordic, same language, and something like that. In such a domain, the real power of the society lies with the people. This is by necessity. It's also acknowledged by Sharia through the principle of Shura, or you could translate it as the government of the people, for the people, by the people, democracy. We can use the word democracy or Shura interchangeably in that sense. I know some people have allergy in that, but it's because certain misconception was the meaning of the democracy, and misunderstanding of the meaning of democracy. Demo means public, cracy means ruling of the public. Misunderstanding the word of ruling, what ruling means, because ruling has several meanings, and they think democracy, ruling of the people, mean the people have the power to legislate and to define what good and evil. That's not what's meant of democracy, nor the word cracy. But we come to that in detail. So the real power lies in the people, and every person have a share in that power. So if you do not have enough power to guide and control the society, and the real power said in the people, that means essentially that you have a majority sharing with you your views and so on. You will not be able to rule and control it. In certain singular situation, a military man or a king, an invading king, will take power, but this will be by usurpation and by force. And unless he can create a consensus around him, accepting him for whatever reason, like a coup d'etat, which removes, let's say, a corrupt king and presents itself to the people as a savior, and then the people may identify with a certain time. That's one solution. Another solution, an invading king saying, your previous government were not caring for you properly, I will care for you better, or something like that. In time past, the people accepted the idea that the king owns everything, and if he takes over, then he is a legitimate king. Like, for example, take example for England, when William the Conqueror, William the Bastard, actually, that's his original title, because he's an illegitimate son of someone. Anyway, when he defeated Godwinson, the Saxon king, because William is a Norman, the Saxon king, which has a complicated background history. He believes he is the legitimate heir and legitimate owner of the throne of England. That's the reason, and got even the approval of the Pope for that. He invaded. He was lucky, or whatever for the sign Allah has in the universe. He succeeded in killing the king and defeating him, and then he marched towards London and got crowned. And the people accepted that, just because whoever succeed and control become the king. Exclude that and go to real power, and the people accepted their acceptance, and silencing may be motivated by certain political creed or certain philosophy or by an advice of the church, whatever the motivation. If they would have or rebelled or stayed home, William would not have become a king. His governmental system would collapse. So the real power is in the people. To run the government and run the state affairs genuinely, the normal and genuinely the fundamental state should be that you have the majority. So that's a physical reality. That's the fact of the real universe. And the Sharia endorsed that the real power lies with the people, and gave them by the divine sovereign Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the sovereign now. The real sovereign now is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Islam is based on this fundamental fact. There is one sovereign, one real king, who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the real king. He is the king, and he is the sovereign, and he's the one who enacts laws. He gave all this authority by his creation, the people in such a fashion that they can have power, because they have free will and sufficient intellect. Obviously, we have to exclude the mentally deranged and the immature, the one underage, and so on. But this is understandable. Nobody disputes that. But all mature adult men and women, etc., they share in that. And the Sharia endorsed that, give them the power. Okay. Now, what is the situation if you are a minority, being either immigrants, just now immigrating yourself, or sons and grandsons of immigrants, or being converted, but you are a minority in number? What is your relation as a minority of Muslims to the surrounding society and the controlling authority? That has to be clarified. This clearly is not clear in people's mind. But the immigrants to England, for example, essentially British imperial import, getting worker, especially post-Second World War. There have been some people imported before that, even in the 19th century. The first one from subcontinent, I think, settled, the first family, the first man settled essentially in Walthamstow. That's the reason that became an Asian area. And then everyone immigrating after that, joining him there, and the area became dominated by, and then it spread, and then we know that now East London is Bengali dominated and things like that. That developed over almost 2 centuries. But these are original immigrants. And then some original English people, original meaning they are their fathers and grandfathers, so on, up to a time immemorial, they are either of Norman or Saxon or Brittonic or Celtic origin. You see, even 4 different tribes and 2-3 different languages almost. Anyway, somehow we can assume that they are the natives and they are original ones. If we exclude, obviously, several thousand years, the Druids which have been essentially exterminated. Yeah, okay. So you see, history is very dynamic, but over 100, 200, 300 years, you can have some kind of stability and structure. What is their position? Most of these immigrants, and also the converted Muslims, majority of them, they have relatively shallow understanding of Islam, which has been delivered through the usual madahib, usual schools, and in the mutilated form, which has been the first mutilation, which is violating the principles of governance, by the Munafiq Kafir Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan. And since then, the deviation and the contamination of the Islamic life persisted and continued. Because of the protection of the Quran and the Sunnah in its totality, not every piece of the Sunnah, but the Quran and every letter in the Sunnah, which we can be proven now even by carbon dating and many other things. Because of that, the genuine Islam remained, but in the books and in the literature and in the theory, not in the practice. In the practice, it's just individual, simple Islam is sufficient. They are not Kafir, they are Muslims, but is not the model which has been presented by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the Sahaba in Medina and the Khulafa al-Rashidin until the shameful abdication of Al-Hasan ibn Ali. It's not that. And the understanding of the relation to the state and the authority is not the correct understanding. What was being spread since Muawiyah is that you have to obey the ruler and somehow obey his commands. Yes, people theoretically say don't obey if he orders ma'asiyah, but this is all essentially theoretical. Nobody really scrutinized, and the majority of scholarship became traitors. They sold out, like the scholars of the Jews and Christians also, by the way. This is a disease of all religions, that formalized scholarship, or tend to be having the greatest fraction of hypocrisy of a certain ideology. And this is for this ummah, what the Messenger of Allah said in a hadith narrated by both Uqba ibn Amir al-Juhani and Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, which has essentially the same wording. أكثر منافق أمة قراءها. The majority of the munafiq ummah are in the scholarship, not for the common people. Common people are good, humble, simple Muslims, but the understanding of Islam is that worshiping Allah, praying, paying the zakah, either to the public treasury if there's a collector. If there is none, then they will do their best to bring the zakah themselves and bring it to the people who deserve. Fasting Ramadan, if you get lucky and you accumulate enough money and the roads are safe at your time, if you are lucky, then you can do a Hajj and maybe some good deeds, be good to the parents, be good to your wife or to your husband, etc. These, which is basic, is the definitely fundamental. That's what the exercise of normal life, normal day. But public affairs, management of the state affairs and so on became essentially went out of the people's focus. It is not in their focus that this is an essential part of Islam, which is testified by hadith in Mustadrak al-Hakim, when the hadith says the knots of Islam will be untied one by one. Knots. So Islam is like a series of knots. They will be untied and destroyed one by one. The first one to be untied and destroyed is ruling, and the last one is salah. So it can happen. So Islam has various fundamental notes. Ruling is a fundamental note of Islam. And ruling is relating to public life, society, judicial ruling, governmental ruling, which means administration, and also parliamentary or like fiqh ruling. Let us say what you can express it as legislative. That's translating the Islamic principle and Islamic injunctions into formalized laws and regulations, which may be adapted to the time, because most of laws and regulations usually regulate what's permissible. But what's permissible is defined by Sharia, or fundamentally. It's not defined by the parliament. But what's permissible can be organized a certain way, depending on the technology of time and all these things. So you need to have continuous fiqh, continuous new legislations and so on, but derived from Sharia. And this is usually in mature countries in recent times is done by parliaments and elected bodies. All that is gone out to the focus of the common Muslims. Only very few Muslims and Muslim scholars that was clear in their mind. Very few for history. The rest just have abdicated that. So this first, most important note, which is the ruling, has been untied first. And the one who untied is one from Bani Umayyah, is Muawiyah ibn Sufyan, but we're not discussing it today now. So these Muslims imported after the World War here in England. Let's take England as an example, mostly after the Second World War, but some before that, as I said, they are of the lowest level of education. Most of them are illiterate, coming from villages of India and Pakistan. And the best you can expect for them is that they protect at least their salah, and for the kids will have an opportunity to read some surahs of the Quran in madrasas. That's the best what you can expect for them. And they did their considerably good job on their own effort. And in that generation, at the first generation, second generation, they did not really think to participate in elections. Some may participate, some may not. It was not in their vision. It was not in their focus. A third generation, like in the 90s when I arrived here, that was essentially a third generation which is giving the tone. Some of them were with Hizb ut-Tahrir, some with Muslim Brotherhood, and the rest was common Muslim. No, not. Then the question came about that since the number becomes significant as in certain boroughs and election circles, or election units, what they call it. It's called a circle, election circle. I don't know what the official name of the place where you can elect some person representative. I think election circle or election area or a borough, whatever it is. Like the Westminster Parliament is 600 something, and each one is elected from a certain circle or what they call constituency, something like that. In some constituency, we got considerable number of Muslims who, if they participate, they could affect the election. So the existing parties, because they are citizens now in a society which is formally more or less secular, beware that England constitutionally and philosophically is not a secular society. It's actually a theocracy, because the king, which has half of the sovereignty theoretically, is the head of the church. So it's a theocracy. He's a priest, he's the high priest, and the king at the same time. So it's actually a theocracy. Most likely, the other formal theocracy in the world, similar to England or more theocracy, is Iran, where the fuqaha and the scholars are at the same time the head of state or something like that. So it's a theocracy, but leave that. Somehow the people argue that it's also a democracy and a rule of people, a rule of law. Okay, fine. So they have to count everyone. They cannot say, you are a Muslim, you are not allowed to vote. Because that has been because centuries before, like for example, John Locke, one of the philosophers of liberalism, he talked about freedom of expression and so on and liberalism, but liberalism for him mean only for the Protestant. Catholics should not be given for freedom of expression because it will undermine the state. That's John Locke himself, verbally. So don't be fooled by liberalism. It started like that. But slowly it was clear that this will lead to endless wars and bloodshed, which led toward the end of the Middle Ages, the beginning of the Enlightenment. The religious war, the 30-year, the 100-year war, were mostly religious wars or motivated by religion. So society will become unstable. People will be killing each other. So you have to give everyone a vote. Everyone means everyone. You cannot single a religion. Jews were excluded, but then in the 19th century, they were adopted and accepted and so on, and given votes and taken out of the ghetto in the prosecution, at least formally. Still, prosecution was there and certain tricks and sneaky ways, but formally, by law, they can vote. The same for Muslims. So it is a vote, which can have an effect. And parties were then accelerating, and it could have an effect not only in this constituency, but in quite a number of constituencies. For example, all East London is essentially Muslim dominated. Birmingham, most of Birmingham, except few areas, is Muslim dominated. Many cities like Preston, like many next to Liverpool and so on, whole medium-sized big towns and small cities are Muslim dominated. So there's quite a number of constituencies. You have to get the votes and you have to fight for the votes. And in that, the leftist parties recognize that Muslim, because of the issue of zakat, issue of human equality, human dignity, enshrined in Islamic creed, and also simple Muslim have that in their perception naturally. Their aversion toward the oppression, toward it, favors the leftist. And also because most of them were working class and so on, they needed to have benefits, to have these things in a structured way, and the left is the one offer that. So the leftists rallied to get Muslim votes. And this went, like, let's say, for the first generation, second generation, third generation, naturally without much discussion. In the 90s, when Islamic movement became very mature, Muslim Brotherhood was in the field, and they have many representatives and centers here. Even Jama'at-e-Islami, together with Muslim Brotherhood, because they're very close in ideology, they have their center in Leicester, I think, and in the Midlands and so on, major centers. They have to discuss this issue. Hizb ut-Tahrir came forward saying, no, democracy is kufr, you should not be voting at Sota, haram. On actually, jihadi say that. Hizb ut-Tahrir did not say that like that, but say democracy is kufr, meaning ruling by man-made law, which is clearly kufr. That's not an issue. So there was a discussion, and then people have to justify to participate, and they don't have a theory how Muslims. What is the limitation of the presence and the life of Muslims in a domain of kufr? I mean, a domain where the majority are not Muslims and the power is not in your hand. You cannot rule by Islam. fully as you are supposed to be if you rule. The one Hereditary claim, you have to rule and you have to establish Khilafah. And they said, okay, but concerning Britain, don't bother about that. Just focus on the Majal, on the Muslim world. Your work here should be supportive for that. Forget about the location. Muslim Brotherhood and so on, being amorphous, having no clear ideology, said, no, you should participate, power sharing, because you could influence Muslim benefits and interests, especially internationally. You can give your vote for those who are closer to Palestinian rights, or those closer to Muslim rights, those who are apparently, or at face at least, not imperialist like Labour. Labour is generally less imperialistic and colonialistic than the Tories, and so than the Conservative. So you give your vote to support this direction. And there was a discussion. I have a paper. Maybe it will be a link to it is maybe slightly outdated in some aspects, but I think it's the main ideas that are clear. Participating in this discussion, I argued at that time is that we have first to say why Muslims are required to participate in election. What is the benefit for that them? Or question, are they allowed in the first place? What their position in the domain of Kufr? It turns out, if we look at the Sharia injunctions and the evidences of Quran and Sunnah, is that they're not allowed, if they rule or participate in ruling, they're not allowed to rule by Kufr. If they join an elected assembly, which has substantive ruling, that's meaning like a legislative assembly, like Westminster Parliament, not the local administration. Local administration are not really legislative; they're administrative bodies. So there is no fundamental problem there. Although there are some problems. Some problems would happen, but fundamentally, as a fundamental structure, there's no problem. But Westminster is a fundamental, because if you are elected there, you are expected to participate in legislation, to participate in ruling, to participate in communication, and so on. But as a member of parliament, this is a fine point we may discuss it down the road, you are not obliged. But if you join the government, that's what Muslim Brotherhood and Azam Tamimi was arguing, power sharing, then you are stained, you are stuck, exactly like Hamza Yusuf of Scotland. The moment you become prime minister or minister, you are stuck. You have to rule with the existing system. Now, Hamza Yusuf went further steps, advocating changes of the law in a catastrophic direction, anti-Islamic direction. But leave that aside, even without that, he would have been stayed. So is that justified? Are we allowed to do that? And there was a discussion that the Najashi was not ruling by Islam. So Najashi was in state of duress. Najashi was in state of duress. He could not. He first of all, he was a king before becoming a Muslim anyway, and he was in power. When he embraced Islam secretly, there was his own people and some another personality rebelled against him. There was a war, and it's narrated by Ibn Ishaq with a correct isnad, narrated by Salama, which was in Abyssinia at that time, that a man, a leader or a counter leader, accused him of being a secret Muslim and supporting Muslims and undermining Christianity, and there was a warfare. And in that situation, the Sahaba offered him to fight with him, said, what can you do? 70, 80 men. I have tens of thousands of soldiers. But best you watch carefully, have someone to watch the battle. If the battle goes negatively against me, then you have occasion, and they prepare the ship for them, then you can't go back home, because this man will exterminate you. Quraysh may be milder than him. You go back. If I succeed, then everything continues as it is. So he was in a state that he could not rule by that. And they usually argue also with Yusuf being ruling by Kufr, which is a very dark issue and highly questionable. All these arguments. And in addition, it is a previous Sharia which does not apply to us anyway. Maybe there was a permission by him, but in reality, he was not ruling by Kufr. So all of this is obscure. But the argument came. The people started discussing. Now suddenly, alhamdulillah, these issues, deeper issues, that what is your position in a domain of Kufr as a Muslim? The ruling is clear. وإذا حكمت بينهم وإن جاءوك فاحكم بينهم معرضا. If they come to you about the Jews and Jewish community around Medina who were in a confederate situation with the Muslims, if they come to you for ruling or for settling arbitration, then you have the choice. Either you arbitrate with them or you turn away from them. If you turn away from them, they will not harm you. But if you rule between them, then rule with that what Allah has revealed and with justice. You have no liberty to do otherwise. And don't follow their desires and their laws. No. You apply your law. So you have clear injunction there what to do if you rule, but you're not obliged to rule. And this also really is a clarification of what Hizb ut-Tahrir claim, that you have to establish khilaf, you have to rule. No, what you have to establish in Muslim domain where you have majority, that you pursue, educate the majority to take power in itself and start exercising in the Islamic manner. So you have to educate them what is the Islamic manner if they have the power. That's it. That's essentially what. But this is a very complex issue about how to carry da'wah and so on. But in any case, the Sahaba in Abyssinia, we have an example. They were there. They did not. We know for sure that they were never participated in the government. They were living normally. They were doing trades at the time. Systems and government were really highly decentralized. The central authority cares only about some tax collection, protecting the borders, and basic things. The ancient states were not as deep penetrating and so centralistic and bestialish and invading the society as deep as the modern secular state. Even if it claims to be liberal and giving the people rights and so on, it's really interfere with the people much more than ancient kingdoms. Ancient kingdoms, you can live all your life. We have no interaction with the state. Barely any interaction. Now you cannot live. You have to interact with the state almost on a daily basis. From the traffic signals, all the way to taxes, all the way to, you cannot open a shop without complicated procedures and licenses and things. And is it the correct zoning? Is that in time past that was not there? So the problem did not arise, but we know for certain that Muslims in Abyssinia did not bother participating in anything. They were doing their own businesses. They were carrying business all the way to Saudi Arabia, to India, where Islam spread early, and some mosques there were established the same time or even before the mosque in Medina, and some even in China. That's what they did. So there's no obligation for you. Now, are you allowed to participate? Now the problem happens if you participate now. If you participate, the question will be, if you participate with the existing parties and their agenda, they clearly have clear Kufr and agenda there. If you're a member of a party. So what to do? Can you participate? Now the question, is there a possibility to participate even in Kufr? Yes, you can, provided either you participate as an independent or as a party, but you have to have your agenda. But if you join the parliament, what to do then? You are stuck. No, we are not stuck, because in the parliament, you can take the parliament as a platform to, first of all, to spread the word of Islam. Any law on any suggestion on any resolution brought on the table, you can put the Islamic point of view, counter point of view. Even if you're a single person, just the people know that's the Islamic point of view. And anything which is not Islamic, you don't vote for it or you vote no for it. Obviously, you can't participate in any government which is ruling by Kufr in that case. So you'll be eternally in opposition and just using that as a platform. The same apply if it's a party. So to settle the question, it has to be fundamentally, what is the function of a Muslim under the Kufr rule? The people get confused, say you have to obey the law of land. No, you don't have to obey the law of land. What is the Kufr rule is that you have a covenant with the ruling, with the majority, or the representative government of the majority, or the king who claimed to be the sovereign, that I don't shed anybody's blood. I don't do any act of war. I don't confront anybody. I don't steal anybody's money. In return, you don't do the same to me. We are at peace with it. Essentially, you look at yourself as you are a separate entity. Even if you're a single person, you are like a state in a state of peace with this guy. That's all. Now, the laws, the valid laws, you are not rewarded for obeying them, in the sense that you are rewarded for obeying the laws of an Islamic government, because there you are obliged by Sharia to obey, by the divine command. Here you are not obliged. You can obey or disobey. But if the command obligates you to do haram or leave a wajib, then you have to disobey. If it is relating to mubah, you can disobey or obey as you like, depending upon your position. It's advisable to obey and comply, so that you don't have friction and confrontation. So these things have to be settled first. And to clarify, for example, traffic regulations. It's regulated mubah, and it's beneficial for everyone, that you don't cross by red light. And the purpose of the law is clear, to prevent accident and prevent injury. It is a valid reason and should be. But let us assume late at night, you come to the crossing, you look right and left, there's nobody, it's red. In the case of you are in Islamic domain, it is haram for you to cross because it is red light and the legitimate authority made it that crossing is worthy of penalizing and you are supposed to obey. In the domain of Kufr, you are not obliged to obey, but it is reasonable and make good sense even to obey. Just have a bit of patience until the traffic signal turns into green. That's it. There's no need to demonstrate that you don't believe that it's domain Kufr by crossing by red. It doesn't serve much of a purpose, but you can. If you do it, you are not sinful. These things have to be sorted and analyzed. It was not analyzed to any great extent by the amorphous point of view of the Muslim world because they have the vision of Islam is amorphous. Until now, it's still amorphous. It's not clear what they think about all these detailed things. It's not even clear that they think that is hereditary monarchy Islamic or not Islam. They say, oh, Islamic system is just, there must be shura, there must be justice, that's all. No, but there's certain fundamental formalities. Shura means essentially the power has to go back to the people. And it's power, not sovereignty. So a hereditary monarchy is impossible because the power is not to the people. It's by the genes of the king. That's not acceptable. That's clearly in Islamic, for example. Even that question is not settled clearly by Muslim world. Hizb ut-Tahrir is better in this time, but they are stuck in the imagination is that the duty everyone is to establish Khilafah. Although they say to establish in the Muslim countries, not here, and so on. But when they were campaigning in England, some of them were thinking that one day we will wake up and the Islamic banner will be on Westminster. They're living in a dream world. It can't be, unless the majority convert to Islam. So in the domain of Kufr, then if you are campaigning for Islamic rule or for Islamic society, it has to be by converting people to Islam. You campaign for Islam. That's all what you do. And that your energy should be there. And before you campaign for Islam, you have yourself to develop your own Islamic character and your family and so on, protect your Islamic identity, meaning you have to oppose any integration. You are in interaction. You are in dealing with the society in an amicable way, but you don't dissolve the society. You don't integrate. Integration means you dissolve, you go away. It's not possible. So all of these things have to be discussed and settled first. These things have been not discussed in the 90s. I tried to put them in discussion a bit in this piece of paper. So the first objection to what Brother Jalaluddin Patel is saying is that what he is talking about is essentially reaction. We take revenge on those who showed a nasty face in the Gaza affair. It's not the issue. Yes, they deserve to be punished. But the punishing them is not to vote for them or no vote for them. It should not have come in that first place. We should not have voted for them in the first place. We should have focused on our Islamic identity, having our own schools, control the school board if we can. This is pure administration, and we should control maybe the local council as much as we can, because this is not a legislative body, it's not a ruling body, it's just an administrative body. Yeah, there's some problem. Local administration in many places, maybe not in England, but for example, in Holland, in Germany, are responsible for red line districts, for managing brothels and so on. Clearly, you will be, if you are in an area where there are religious brothels allowed by the law of the parliament or the law of the king, and then you are supposed to administer that, you will face a dilemma in that situation. And you may be forced to resign or something like that. But that can happen, but it's not as fundamentally a structure of the council. The council is fundamentally concerned about environment, cleaning, rubbish collection, public health, education, and all of that need to be administered properly. Yes, the surrounding system and the law may force you in a certain situation and put you in a certain spot. That's possible. But that can be managed for each case by case and individual. So working just to be effective in school boards and in councils does not mean it is a problem free. There are problems. So you have to be alert about them, to be asserting your identity and your character. If you're not capable for that, this needs a certain level of qualification, certain level of character strength, then the best abstain from that. Just focus on your children and family to protect their identity and bring them an Islamic upbringing. And you will be living fine. Nobody, the surrounding society will not be unhappy with that. But don't participate in the election. So they will not care about your vote, and you don't care about giving them your vote. You manage your affairs the way you like. I will manage my own, what's in my power for my family, and I will carry da'wah, and I will try to get as many by being a model and by being a carrier, proper carrier of da'wah, until one day maybe the whole society converts to Islam, and then we have then situation where then you are capable and you have tamkeen, Allah established you now by having the majority, then you can think then really to take power and government, etc., and then apply Islam in full, because you are not allowed otherwise. You cannot rule by Kufr. It's not allowed. So that is going to the fundamental is important. I know going to the fundamental is always difficult, but in such fundamental questions, that's not a secondary question. It's not a question of that Labour has tended to be traitors and stabbed us in the back, and in the matter of Gaza. That's not a fundamental problem. That's a natural result. That's a natural result. This is a Kafir organization, a Kafir party. They have another vision of the reality. They don't have the same belief in God and the Day of Judgment. They don't have the same understanding and respect for the messengers through history. No, most of them are atheists or agnostics. So we can't share them the vision of the reality and how society should be in the fundamental. So why don't participate with them and vote for them or even becoming a member of them? As a result, that you will end into the swamp, into a filthy, stinky swamp of Kufr. Like, for example, Hamza Yusuf of Scotland. He may have the best intention, I'm not denying that. And then he has, when it comes issues which are clearly anti-Islamic and anti-scripture, LGBT and all these things, he takes that side, because that's the way it works in a secular, agnostic or atheist society. But because of his family connection, I think his wife having some family in Gaza, he is inclined to Gaza on an emotional level. So you fall in contradiction. You may even fall in kufr without knowing. So I think what Jalal is saying good now, maybe we can say it is tactically good. He's taking the opportunity to open the matter and advise the people to punish labor and so on, and taking that possibly as a key. But it should not be understood only as a punishment. Yes, at the moment it's a punishment for them, and they deserve punishment. Yes, agree with them. Agree with that. And then maybe you can get the people's voting strategically to any candidate who showed the nasty face in the Gaza affair to vote against him, vote to someone else. Even if someone else is not to my desire in matter of economy and so on, that will be like a reaction as a punishment. That's all. To punish those who. So it is not really to run the society. No, it's just a punishment. That's it. It's just a reaction. And even that there will be a question mark. Because the only way you can bring, for example, let's say the Labour candidate that area is nasty and Zionist, while the Conservative is less like that. Then you have to vote, obviously, to punish the Labour candidate. You have to vote for the Conservative. That's it. Otherwise, because unless you have sufficient Muslim number there, you can have an independent candidate which stand just with the purpose to undermine one of these two or both of them. So none of them, obviously, one of them will win the election. It's unlikely that you will win. Even in places with Muslim consultation, it's not likely that you will be able to get the highest votes. We'll get maybe second highest, but only they can take away votes mostly from Labour, because most Muslim constituency tend to be Labour areas. Most, not all. Then you take votes from Labour. But I don't think it's a good tactics. I don't think it's also thinking revenge is a good way. It is not the way it should be. The way it should be, we have made a mistake in the past to vote for these people. Now we abstain. We think about establishing our own independent candidates, etc. Now, to the point that Brother Jalaluddin Patel is suggesting that not represent a party or something like that, instead just having independent candidates. I think the issue is looking at concerning parties, looking at that, I think he's mistaken for the following reason. First of all, that the party will be accused to be a fifth column. No, even if they're accused, because from day one, we are Muslims, we are advocating Islamic principles, and Islam is a universal message to mankind, the final message to mankind. So we advocating that we have closer relation by heart to the people outside. But besides, we know that living in this domain does not oblige us, would not allow us to fight with them against Muslims or anybody else. The only fight may be just to defend your own home and your own city. That's it. You're not going to fight in your armies anyway. You're not allowed by Islam. Because in Islam, you are allowed only to fight if someone is oppressing you in your religion, or expel you from your country, or support those who expelled you. That's it. Simple. You don't fight against the German because they dispute about colonies or dispute about oil fields. No, go fight. That's for Kufr, not for us. We'll not fight with you. We'll not fight even if a misguided Khalif does that. We should not have. In history, it has happened. People fought thinking because he's the Khalif, we have to obey him. But that's a mistake also. So we have to have another vision of the reality. So even if they say, you are fifth column, what do you mean with fifth column? We belong to an international creed. We are internationalist. We don't advocate these domains to be some kind of carrier of sovereignty or carrier of some kind of magical justification. That's because you live in England and you have English citizenship. Suddenly England become the center of existence for you, and you fight for England against Germany or against China or something like that. At least they attack and invade and so on and become oppressive. Then you are in self-defense. That's understandable. We don't discuss self-defense. So it cannot happen for a Muslim that if he is aware about what Islam means to be like this guy who was joined the British army and fighting in Afghanistan. He committed a major crime. A'udhu billah, maybe he ended being a kafir and died as a kafir because he was killed there. For example, it must be clear from your own ideology. So let them say 5th column, 10th column. I don't care. The same can be said by an independent candidate because he will be having the same internationalist point of view. So I think the issue that it should be single candidates and so on is not necessarily very persuasive. It could be a party, but with the same principle. If you join the parliament, then you will never vote for any non-Islamic injunction. You will be always criticizing any law and regulation, showing what will be the proper Islamic solution. For that, obviously, to have to be much more educated about Islam. Unfortunately, the majority of Muslims, even activists and so on, are completely bankrupt in this direction. And let us face it, the majority of those who we see them in position, like the mayor of London, and like the one in South London, this guy there who became a mayor, or the one in Scotland and so on, these people, somehow, they want to get power for whatever motivation. Or they think this power is benign, meaning they don't understand what the meaning of Islam and the meaning of life. So we're facing really some difficulties. That is really those who the active persons in the Muslim community currently, let's say for the next election, do we have sufficient people who are well educated and savvy and understand what to do when if the miracle happens and so one of them gets into parliament, which is not very likely, but it may happen. For example, in East London, there are some communities which are overwhelmingly Muslim. Maybe a good candidate, charismatic enough, so could get votes to become an independent one. Will he know how to behave properly in parliament, what to do or not to do? It's question mark. There's a question mark.
Sheikh, I've got a few questions on this actually.
But let's not comment that. So the question that the best thing for the next election, I would advocate exactly like voting for Kufr, just abstain and direct your mind to how we get our own schooling, how we get more control in the local councils, and how we got more control and participation in school boards and other administrative bodies. That's it. I think that's the demand of the hour. Just reacting to as a revenge or not revenge is not opportunistic. It's not even politically is not savvy. I tend generally to be backfiring.
Okay, Sheikh, couldn't you say the same thing about you've critiqued the idea of a fifth column being labeled as fifth column, and to say that because of a preconceived notion that they will, it doesn't matter how they label.
Somehow this nation is like a holy cow. Nobody should touch it. No, this nation is no different than if, for example, there's an Islamic entity in Pakistan, a genuine Islamic, because the current entity is not Islam. It's just by name. It is the government in a Muslim country. It's not an Islamic government, Islamic system. Let's assume, and you are cooperating with them more than you're cooperating with Smith and stuff. They will call you fifth column. See, it's not fifth column. And cooperating with the ideology, I think the valid one. It should be that one should be the valid one here. That's I'm calling Q. That's not fifth column. Fifth column only if you think being in England, being English, being having some kind of bay'ah allegiance to the king is somehow have some kind of holiness. It has none. It simply has none whatsoever. That's
I mean,
it.
I can understand that conceptually, but in terms of that wasn't going to be my original point. But in terms of say communists, for example, McCarthyism and all that kind of stuff, it was a different ideology from a different land, and that's viewed with considerable, with considerable suspicion, overt suspicion, and what have you. So there is some validity in terms of them tarring you with
that's between them and the communists. It's none of our business. Your view of the
as an example, as Muslims, for example, as if we parallel that, for example, we as internationalists we're ideologically affiliated. If the communists also had a similar sort of outlook.
And many communists, for example, what's the name of the guy who leaked the atomic nuclear devices and so on to the Soviet Union? He acted according to his communist creed, and he acted the right way accordingly, because he said that this dangerous woman being monopolized by America and England is a danger for humanity. And he's an internationalist. He believes in the working class, and he sent that he did not receive money for that. He may have been given some things and so on, but that was not the reason. The reason is that motivation. That's what he said in the trial. So what is that? They call him fifth column spy. He doesn't care. He should not care. If he's a genuine communist, he should not care. The same with Muslims. They can't say whatever they want.
Part of the driver here is, look, as Muslims start to evolve.
No, I mean that the argument of fifth column and so on used by the other against a party or against even an independent candidate is irrelevant. It should be discounted. Your definition of fifth column is based on the belief that there's something called England or something, the King of England, which has absolute allegiance. No. There's only one sovereign. That's Allah in heavens. And in earth is the Ummah. And there's none of the Ummah is there. You have to have the power de facto. And we are respecting that. We are not fighting against you. But don't expect us to make you a holy cow. Period. Full stop. Or acknowledge you as having any kind of deep sovereignty. No, you don't have. Even if you think you have. But you don't have. You factually don't have. And according to Sharia, you don't have. The argument is the same if they say about a communist. Genuine communists, they don't bother about that.
My point is more around the fact that as Muslims, we do carry this kind of ghetto mentality. We do feel that this level of desperation. So I can understand you're advocating for the hard slog in terms of building society, being a community, and then doing
because we don't have a deep understanding what Islam is all about concerning ruling and society. It has essentially is extinct and contaminated since Muawiyah usurped power. And the scholars through history, except a few ones who were rebellious and critical, the rest are all really government servants and government scholars to various degrees, some of them to the level of nifaq and kufr, and some less because of weakness and think bloodshed, I should avoid bloodshed and so on. Various levels but all of them essentially surrendered to the governments. Essentially. It even toward the end of Bani Umayyah time, around the turn of the century, it came to such extreme that they believe that the Khalifa is excluded from judgment Yawm al-Qiyamah. He can do whatever he wants because he's a Khalifa. To that extreme, it has happened. Less than 100 years after the death of the Prophet. Because we are not taught that in schools. It's not part of the curriculum we are taught. Because the ruling governments until now are as bad as those agents. They don't dare saying that anymore because that history has smashed that away. Even the Abbasids did not dare go to that extreme, but they came almost to the border of Kufr. The same with the Uthmani. So that's the reason. So we have the situation is like that. Now with the current Muslim situation, the level of education and so on, maybe Brother Jalaluddin Patel is benefiting from the backlash what happened when these parties show their ugly face, use that and motivated by revenge, because this is a motivation or an argument which people understand and maybe rally to that. It's okay, maybe use that for first stage activating the people. You activate the people sometimes with something minor, depending upon their level of sophistication and understanding. But it should not blind us from the fundamental issue, which will never go. It will be here, it will be 100 years as long as Muslims are the of Kufr, and it may be until thousands of years, until you're
Sheikh, I think what Jalal is kind of looking for more from a practical point of view, and this is actually quite common amongst the Muslims. Because the one thing is this: look, for example, you gave the example of we voted them in. It may entirely be the case that most people were apathetic and weren't even politically minded. So, for example, let's go back 20 years in history. We had Asr al-Bukhari, very good brother. He was campaigning heavily in the Muslim community to do this strategic voting 20 years ago, even. And so his experience was that Muslims weren't even politically minded. Forget Hukum Shara, but just even to be concerned about the affairs of the Ummah. So
then that's show, because the brothers campaigning for the strategic voting and so on. I think the basic root of the campaign is wrong. He should educate them politically and tell them your apathetic politics should be now based on ideology, and you abstain deliberately because of ideological difference.
But the thing is, because there was a void in understanding, the same.
I understand. I understand this. I'm not criticizing
it. Chef, not just that. They actually voted purely based on the only time they became very political to serve their own interests. So Blackburn is a very good example. Jack Straw was voted numerous times by the Deobandi or whatever the Tabligh, I can't remember the Leicester community there, repeatedly, despite his antagonistic stance towards Muslims in multiple opportunities. So there's the one thing about in terms of, so look, you've got incumbent parties, Muslims may not have even been voting, so to kind of like, this is almost like year zero. Jalal's approaching it as year zero. That look, this situation has approached itself. A Muslim can build a school and at the same time cast a vote. Now the question, it's a minimal action. Just like I can go to Lidl and get a pint of milk, I can do this. The question is this: people will still do this regardless. The question is, obviously, we need to know the Hukm Shara.
No. Hukm Shara, I discussed Hukm Shara. It's clear. But let us see what's going on. Even that argument is fallacy. You cannot, as a community, establish school and at the same time vote for Labour or Conservative. You may say establishing a school needs a government fund and so on. For that, what you do demonstration, you do sit-ins in front of the human resources and cultural ministry, and insist on having the same benefits of the law, if there's any, for private school and so on, the same one that the Jews and the others have, and the Catholic Church. By demonstrating, you don't need to be in the parliament. You don't need to stain yourself by being a member of but being outside of those is sufficiently strong.
Almost something like a Martin Luther King stroke Malcolm X type of approach in terms of
There's other approaches. The problem is that I think those who called for participation and power sharing, I don't want to mention anyone by name now, but many people have desire for power, or they think the power will give them opportunity to serve Islam. Let's take example, and that's the reason in the essay about voting for Kufr is Kufr. I mentioned the example of even Erdogan. Until now, he could not get Turkey really too, because he went through the system. Yes, but he pretended to be secular. Never advocated until now. He's not even breaking the relation with Israel or stopping the delivery and so on. So you have to sacrifice to that level. Is he under duress or not? We leave that for Yawm al-Qiyamah, for the accounting Yawm al-Qiyamah. At face, he is behaving as bad as the non-Islamic, which are genuine or clear and open kafir, like the UAE and Al Saud. The same happened in Malaysia. Anwar Ibrahim, he suffered and so on, and up and down. Now he's a prime minister, yes, but after he has been mellowed, now all what he says is just nice statement and so on, but he cannot do very much because he's part of the system. So this is like a catch-20. The Islamic solution is the best. You cannot establish, you cannot jump on power by force. You are not allowed to do it. And it's number one. Number two, for to have the genuine power which allowed by Sharia and by necessity of the physical universe, is that to have the majority of the people devoted and well-educated Muslims. That's your work to do. It may take centuries. We are not obliged now to be ruling by Islam. But what you oblige is not, if you rule by Islam and justice. But you are not obliged to rule. Allah did not order you to rule, make it obligatory for you. But if you rule, even the messenger, when we came for him for arbitration, say, when they come to you, either you judge between them or you turn away from them. And if you turn away, they will not harm you. But if you rule, then rule with justice. There's no unnegotiable. It is not obliged even, for God's sake. The same for every single Muslim. It must be clear. Participating in government and so on is not a plus. It's a negative. It's a responsibility. It's a burden, and you'll be accounting Yawm al-Qiyamah more than others. So, and the highest probability that you'll have a bleak face Yawm al-Qiyamah rather than other. Because in that case, they will be asked, why did you do that? Is that a violation of the law? And why didn't you comply with Islamic law? What was the refuse if you are excused? You will face all these questions. But if you don't, then you are not questioned about that.
Okay, say we got 4 million Muslims. And hypothetically, Muslims started to organize, and they building our own schools, doing direct action, asserting ourselves.
Yeah, so
would then there be some kind of benefit associated if we did, like Sinn Féin, for example? Sinn Féin, they took their seats in Parliament. They are of the people. They never swore allegiance to the Parliament, and they never participated.
I didn't say they should not have independent candidate or parties participate. I say the energy spent for that is better spent elsewhere. But if you are definitely develop the society to such a level that you have really your own characteristic and personality, then do by all means participate and try to use the Parliament as a platform for showing Islamic solution, issue Islamic resolution, even if nobody votes for it except yourself. You table a resolution. It will be rejected by the majority, no problem. It is tabled and you can publicize it in your newspaper. You use it for da'wah. It's part of da'wah. It's perfectly fine. No problem with that. Let me give an example. Hereditary is known to be extreme in matter of ruling with Kufr and God. That's well known. Nevertheless, in the 50s, Sheikh Ahmad al-Da'wa, one of the leadership committee of the Hizb, participated in the election. He participated in many places. The only one who succeeded, Ahmad al-Da'wa, and he joined the parliament. When the oath of allegiance to the king and so on was taken, he did not say. He said just he make an oath that he is allegiance to the Ummah and to the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of Muhammad Rasulullah. That's it. And everyone who says shocked, they will look at each other. What should do with them? They don't do anything. They knew if they move against that, that will be a big scandal. So they remained silent. He stayed there and tabled all kinds of criticism, and even submitted a law about evidences and witness statements and blood tests and all of these things. Called Qanun al-Bayyinat. He submitted the Hizb point of view about that in the parliament. It was not approved, but it was tabled, and it's publicized by the Hizb as the suggestion, the proposal Hizb Tahrir for Qanun al-Bayyinat. You can do that. Despite Hizb Tahrir being extreme, declaring the Jordanian regime to be a Kufr regime, all of that. He could. Obviously, that would not fit in the bill of the so-called jihadi who declared democracy Kufr, and joining in the parliament is like being an idol worshipping. It's not true. You can't be in an idol worshipping temple and stand there under the idol and call people to Islam. All prohibited for you is to worship the idol there, but you can't be there. The Prophet was doing da'wah on the Safa, standing on Safa, on Safa all the time in Mecca. They were idols. Does not prevent him from call da'wah and say these are idols, do not exist. Just your imagination. Forsake them. Demolish them. But the problem, the understanding is not there. And the majority of Muslims, they are at the simple mind. They say the first generation were almost all of them illiterate. There were barely anyone.
Now people are growing
more advanced. Yeah, they're more advanced. Alhamdulillah. Now we can put these things on the table and discuss it in a constructive and reasonable way.
Before we, two things I need to get further clarification on. So you just make it absolutely certain. We gave this scenario of Labour Conservative and a person wanting to punish one of them, or just basically to make a statement, specifically around the issue of Gaza. So if there's only, as I understand it, if you have two secular political parties and it's a general election and you vote for one of them, you effectively give them the authority to legislate on your behalf, in which case...
Yeah, that's it. That's the reason I said I give the title, which is like a clickbait, voting for Kufr is Kufr, is explained in details inside. That if you vote a party which has a secular or clear Kufr agenda, I say they propose gay marriage, meaning we are voting for that. You cannot run away because you give them your vote, they will legislate in that direction. That is their party, what they call it, election, what they call it?
Manifesto.
Manifesto, election manifesto is clear. It says that clearly. So you're voting for that. You're approving that. So no, I don't approve it. I'm just, you cannot get away.
So there is no choice around these main incumbent parties. It would have to be something independent. But your main contention is
exactly it must be. No doubt about that. That must be this way. You have to independent, either independent candidate or an Islamic party.
So an independent candidate, which would have to have a manifesto which explicitly doesn't have kufr in it and explicitly
clearly tell the people I'm joining the parliament to carry da'wah, to propose this. I also will advocate, for example, improving the benefit of these things, because it's the people have the right to that. No problem with that. That's very perfectly Islamic. I will also argue and bring a proposal to abolish usury banking. All of that I will do, which will never be accepted for centuries possibly, but doesn't matter. He has to have his clear agenda.
So your contention is aside with the presupposition that the person is standing independent on an Islamic basis, is that it would be considerable waste of energy in some respects, because there's
no, I'm not saying it may be not waste of energy, a certain historic situation. That's okay. But for the existing parties, the only way to punish them is then, obviously, in one place, is either to vote for the other one, then you are voting for the Kufr agenda of another type, just to punish for Gaza. I don't think it's worth doing that. Then put another candidate who his purpose is to take as much votes from the one who is worst of them. But the problem, you are putting a candidate which has relatively unlikely that he will win the election. So all what he is take votes from the worst one of them. So his campaign will be against that one specifically, beside on Islamic agenda. It may work. It has to be how you have to study every constituency by constituency. Maybe it will work in East London, but it doesn't work in Wembley, for example.
Yeah, this is what Jalal did in his expanded article. He did single out.
I'm not denying that. It may be, but that issue should be now, after Gaza, is an opportunity to start applying that, maybe under the banner of punishing labor or punishing this, which we have voted before. For example, in East London is labor. Obviously, the representative is labor, as far as I know. I don't think there's one constituency have this conservative lady where the people seized her place and demonstrated against her when she voted with the government against the ceasefire issue. You remember that woman? She has something.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, and the people there were angry and surrounded her surgery and so on, and were shouting against her, etc., like that. That one is obviously in the Conservative Party. So even in East London, there is, in that case, in that place, you should have a candidate who one part of his agenda is to get that woman out, for example, punishing labor, especially in the punishing conservative. This may add fuel, because the votes going from there, some of them will go to the independent candidate, but most likely will not get enough to be the highest one. So the next one will be the one for conservative, and maybe as bad or worse. The labor, he may be as bad or worse than this one. Still was catch-22.
Yeah, but
you may try it as a punishment. Okay, we will punish that woman for that specifically. It's okay, no problem. But you have to have a clear Islamic agenda, and it's specifically mentioned here that she should not be elected. And then by necessity, most likely you will not get enough votes unless miracle happens. And then the one who gets the vote is then in the constitution of that woman, it will be the labor man. The labor man there may be even worse than that. But most likely, because the labor man is a secular, possibly atheist, God knows what here, he will try to ride the wave and will make a nice statement about Gaza. So you win a bit for that, at least hypocritically, something, maybe. That's all what you can get there. But also, you get another benefit. If the candidate is sufficiently savvy, like this brother, for example, Jalaluddin himself, maybe he stand there in election if he's eligible for being a candidate, for example. Let us assume that, and he can get enough funds and so on to do the campaign. He will gain experience how to talk to the people and become a public figure. That's also a benefit, because participating in an election polishes your character and make you a public speaker. That's good. All of these good. I'm not denying anything of that. But not to share power. What was advocating in the 90s and the work for voting for Kufr is Kufr was addressing. Is first of all, get you to rule by Kufr and put you in a corner, in an ideological corner, may undermine even your Iman, take you personally out of the domain of Islam into Kufr, number one. Secondly, it will not serve the Ummah in anything, really. And get energy wasted in that direction. That's what I was addressing that time. Don't look for sharing power for that phase, because this will not be possible without some kind of deals and horse trading, which is definitely not Islamic, which will not benefit Islam.
Yeah,
although, like for example, in Turkey, like the group of Erbakan and so on, they did not see it this way, and you could say they achieved something a little bit. For example, Erbakan was focused. I met Erbakan, discussed with him. We discussed the issue here. I said, I'm aware of this, but I wanted to be there so I can start massive industrialization of Turkey, because Turkey has to be an industrialized country. The next phase, Allah will bring whatever He wants. So that's the reason when he got to like the second strongest party, and Ajawid was forced to take him as a deputy prime minister. Because he's the second member of the government, so the Atatürk party and himself, and he wanted to offer, as usual, the deputy prime minister, and the second man should be either minister of defense or minister of foreign affairs. No, I don't want these. I want the minister of industry.
So is it Erdogan or the Erbakan?
Erbakan. No, this is in the 70s. And luckily, he we say maybe by design of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, although I still believe that he should not have done that if it has been ideologically sound, but he has his own excuses. May Allah forgive him. He is the one who saved the Turkish part of Cyprus from being absorbed by the Greek part. Because when the British, together with Ajawid, most likely secretly plotted that so-called unification under Macarius, unification of the island, and Ajawid was in a holiday, most likely to hiding away from the problem. And Erbakan met with the commanding of the armies and told him, look, he played the nationalistic card. Look, the Turks will be exterminated there. Say, what we can do, we are a member of NATO, these are a member of NATO, and the British say, I'm not asking you about what you do, don't worry about it. Can you make a landing and prevent that? Say, we can, but who can give the order? Say, I am the acting prime minister. Do it. Overnight, they change the situation 180 degrees by force. And I remember in Germany, the Starfighter, that was the prime aeroplane at the time, F104G is the German version. I think the Turks have also a German version, F104G, was flying, and the commentator on television say, I don't believe my eyes. NATO planes owned by Turkey are attacking a NATO country, attacking Nicosia. And he made the landing and controlled the whole Turkish area, but even took other parts, and some areas became depopulated. Now they're populated by Turks. Now Erdogan took them, joined them after 50 or 60 years. But anyway, I mean, it was the luck of the people there that he was acting. And then Ajawid was obviously came rushing back, but it was too late to do anything. And he obviously praised this action and so on. He has to ride the wave. I think he plotted it with the British, and he thought in his absence nobody will know what to do, and the matter will be, and then they will be negotiating for 1,000 of years. No, Erbakan solved it in 48 hours.
Something like Turkey is actually a good example where there could be an argument for being surreptitious. So,
but in Turkey, we have a unique situation that the majority of the people are Muslims. So we have some
and a system which is anti-Islamic.
Yeah, and it's a mixed situation. Now you could say participating in the power there, you may be able then to use the levers of power to activate the Muslim majority and get rid. And that's what they did. So you can feel that may be there another analysis is needed. But we are talking about a domain where you are just 5 million out of 60. Forget about all of these things. All what is there is to protect your identity, get the necessary benefit for you as a ummah of da'wah and deen, and just attend your normal life. And let Allah manage the universe. Which majority is managed, what is developed, you never know what develops, what happens.
And I mean, in the event that somebody does stand as an independent and they have a clear remit, then, I mean, ultimately that's going to be down to a person's scheduling or their resources, whatever it may be. It's something to be encouraged. I mean, provided they stay within the...
That's what have to be discussed every black community, a case like Turkey, or what you're meaning?
No, in the UK, someone stands in
the UK, the Muslims have to sit together and analyze that. The fleshing out the program in details need the Muslim community to work. But the fundamental principle must be advocated first, getting the majority of people to understand that and commit to it. Then they will have their own organization, committees discussing every situation. Situation in Slough is different than situation in East London, different than situation in Birmingham. Yeah, look for some in Birmingham. There's certain areas which completely Muslim dominated. When that school teacher, school principal started issues with LGBT and so on education, they seized the school and forced her to step back. For example, that's another situation that you will not be able to get in Wembley. You may be able to get in Wembley if you activate the Muslims. Have 300 people into the school and blocking the school, say, we'll not accept that. Forget about that.
So kind of more grassroots campaigning.
Yeah, that's like that. Getting the Muslim. Look at, for example, the demonstration which had been managed by the community. Do we have anyone in parliament supporting that? No. It's a grassroots. It's a community doing that. Activated by some da'iyah and by the general. In that case, obviously, the emotional push is strong. And the bombing and the atrocities and the crime committed, the Nazi crime committed by this cancerous entity, motivated the people, motivated even non-Muslims all over the world. But this is, if we have educated the Muslim properly since the 90s and so on, the effect would have been much more enormous than that. It may be very well possible at the time that they could have even toppled the government here and forced the government change. But it did not develop to that level yet. But in a way, we got braver man out. Although not because of the demonstration, but because of her conflict with the police and because the king hinted through the grandson of Churchill clearly that he's unhappy with her behavior. And she's polarizing the society and doesn't want the king wanting peace in his realm. For example, that's my theory, at least, behind the scene. You know, I will explain that in another occasion. So, we could, if the Muslims were more thoroughly educated and more sophisticated than what they are now, if we had started that probably in the 90s, and the Muslim did not split like Hereditary split into factions, and the faction, the Muhajirun, went off tangent, became Wahhabi, and wasted the energy in some BS related to Daesh, and also a section of Hizb ut-Tahrir are still sitting somewhere in dark rooms and discussing Bin Laden being an American agent. Hizb 2 and so on, and Muslim Brotherhood are just laying low and keeping their amorphous ideology, not willing even to advance further, and preferring to cooperate with the Saudi regime against Yemen and with the regime against this and against that, and never gave real help to Morsi in Egypt. And make a real stand because they can't. They don't have even the proper concept of state and society.
There are some changes happening. For example, Sheikh.
Yeah, definitely. We have them. We have definitely changes from this time. Definitely.
There's actually there is an emerging grassroots movement in terms of this is effectively so Sheikh Haytham is very much my overall impression is very much in towards he has a some sort of a roadmap in terms of Muslims taking more autonomy, being more
but don't forget that 20 years ago he was more pro-election and so on. That is, there's a claim that Hamza Yusuf is his student and things like that. But I think he has recognized that will not produce that what he was envisioned, because he definitely a devoted Muslim. He definitely understands the fundamentals of Islam more probably than the majority of people, etc. And he sees that it has to be done differently. So what I hear indirectly that he's starting to wash his hand from the old methodology, which produced people like Hamza Yusuf and so on.
Inshallah. I mean, so some people of that type of caliber, understanding, or under his type of tutelage, I can see it would be a very good avenue. So if for example, if you look at the prominent people, you've got your thinking Muslims, you've got blogging theology, though they're more blogging theology more on a
I suggest all of these new thinkers and all these new sites, and also the ancient one like Sheikh Haytham and so on, should really come in together in conferences and discussing. You remember when both of us attended that introduction of the book by Bert, what's his name?
Yahya Bert. Oh, the research, Yahya Bert Jahangir.
Yeah, Yahya Bert and what's his name? The one from Manchester.
Yeah, Jahangir
Muhammad. That was an occasion which we have exchanged certain ideas, and there was surprising convergence to certain ideas and so on. That should be more frequent. We should have maybe every 2 or 3 months, like a conference, like things like that, to get people, to rally people.
I mean, even if you look at the forerunners to this, Muslim Parliament with Dr. Khalid Siddiqui, rahimahullah, that was CCF was another, those kind of initiatives, and I can see, for example, there are multiple groups like who kind of gravitate towards the Sheikh Haytham type of. One of the brothers calls it Ikhwabis. He calls him, he's one of the brothers that I introduced you to. He refers to them as Ikhwabis, as in Ikhwani with Salafi leanings. So they're like a practical dimension. These are kind of, I can see something can ferment, and those are the kind of people, if they have the strong principle stance, if they, for example, if they're listening, if they adopt some of the Usuli points, or at least discuss, we can always facilitate behind the scenes discussions anonymously as need be. I think this kind of initiative between knowledgeable people and active people,
it's badly needed, and more frequently in the early in the century after September 11. Most likely by a hint of the British government and the Saudi government, the Islam Channel, which is owned by someone in Riyadh, although the one who runs it is having a jihadi background, but he cannot express himself and he has to hedge his position and so on. They called for these these conferences. You remember once a year, what they call it?
GPU, Global Peace and Unity event.
Yeah, Peace and Unity or something like that. But that was contaminated, but maybe at the moment he could not do better. But and because it most likely the British government is partly behind that, because in some places, like I remember I attended one of those, and there was the Solicitor General of the UK, and he was talking about the jihadi and so on, talking about Khawarij as if he's a madkhal. I was laughing my head off. A white British man who is not a Muslim is discussing these and classifying certain people as Khawarij.
Maybe it's a new form of madkhali, the kafir madkhali, open kafir madkhali.
Openly kafir madkhali.
I mean, they had PVE people all over that place. I remember.
So that was, but it was good. It attracted some people to Islam. It had some benefit, but that stain is really, and it was an attempt to give the Muslim a little bit that they should not completely cave in for the threat of the after September 11. But most Muslims were really terrified, and they went into hiding. Nobody was really resisting and standing firm, except maybe Muhajirun, but in the wrong way, by the Daesh point of view, which is faulty by itself, faulty and wrong, was faulty ideologically, fundamentally faulty, and also politically improper and not opportunistic. It is wrong in every direction, which led to the disaster we see with Muhajirun and marginalizing them. And although they have very good elements, but they are gone, they are finished. Myself, this poor fellow talking to you, I took a firm stand, but as a single person, I didn't care. I didn't care, expressing clearly that September 11, the attack is legitimate because of this and this and this, and we have writing in that. Well, the rest of people went in hiding. Everyone was subdued, and they started just moving just recently. getting out of the fear and starting moving. They could have, if their education would have been better in the 90s, they could have gotten out of this first shock a little bit better. But anyway, it's no good to lament about the past. What to do next day? That's the question. Forget about looking in the back mirror, look forward. Because our car is moving forward. We don't want to overrun someone on the way. The past is gone, finish. What's overrun is done, finished, gone.
I think also another thing is God, Allah brings barakah out of certain events. You can see that people have been inspired, even non-Muslims, by the events in Gaza, and it's given people more of a backbone.
Yeah, this is come from heaven. If a few years ago we had the pandemic is also from heaven. Muslim countries and Muslim groups and could have benefited from it for da'wah and so on. They benefited minimally because that really broke the back of the United States of America and the economic system considerably. We could have benefited more if we had, but that has to be done on the state level. Unfortunately, the state level, we don't have any leadership of any value anywhere.
What do you mean by how could we have capitalized off of COVID? What do you mean in terms of
because the system here was in deep trouble. You could have made some economic changes. You could step forward and attack the usury system, change your systems and so on. But nobody did that to any great extent. But that's only in the government level. Common people will not be able to do much in that.
Okay, inshallah. I mean, I think this is good enough for us as an initial discussion point. I'll get this published as soon as
my argument, to summarize my argument, is that we have to see what's fundamentally the obligation and the prohibition for Muslims living in a domain of Kufr, ruled by Kufr, and also the majority are not Muslims. Majority are kafir. Let's call it by name. Kafir. What is their limitation of action and political involvement and so on, and remove the idea that you are somehow obliged or required to jump on power or rule or participate. No, we are not required. You're required to avoid that. But if it happens that power comes to you against your will or by design of Allah in the universe, then you have to rule by Islam. There's no choice there. For that, you have to understand what is the fundamental principle of ruling by Islam and the main fundamental things which are unnegotiable. And the understanding of that is very limited. It's very limited. Like, for example, when Morsi was for that 1 year, I appealed to him several times through our broadcast. I don't know if it's reached him, if he listened to it or didn't. I told him one of the more important steps, which will be of historic breaking, it doesn't cost any money, is to get the so-called state security apparatus to dissolve it, get all their records, which is 90% of it just filth and sex intimidation, and this personality sleeping with that woman and that prostitute going to that place and these things, take them all in a tractor, pile them in a Tahrir Square where the people were demonstrating for a long time until the Mubarak regime collapsed, pour gasoline in it and burn it with good and evil. Say, we don't need it. It may have some jewels there. We don't want the jewels. And the pile of filth will burn, and that administration will be dissolved. All the people working there, they will be discharged. And even their pension and so on are not legitimate, will be cancelled. They have to go and now say, work as street sweeper or work as farmer. You don't need to think about punishment at the moment unless someone has committed a crime and then there's a special case against him, there's something else. Such an action does not cost money. This will cause a shockwave all over the world. There's a state here, doesn't need an internal secret service. It can survive and prosper without that. But he didn't do. Because the people do not have a vision for that. This must be one of the first steps of any emerging new Islamic state. There's no mabahith, no secret service internally spying on the people. It's an absolute no. A red line between Kufr and Islam. Because the prohibition is absolute. And breaking the absolute prohibition is an act of Kufr. Legislating against that, even establish an institution or an apparatus for that. Dissolve it. This would have caused shockwaves in the whole world. Unfortunately, none of that could have done. And many other things he could have done, which doesn't cost any money. Just need the courage to do it. But most likely, why didn't do it? Because it's not in their vision. They never understood that. They never analyzed that. Never study it. They never study it. So that's our problem. We have to get this understanding deeper and wider. And then the people will, then their behavior will be correct. Then they will be starting cooperating. They'll start what's more fundamental. What's more fundamental?
Bold actions, bold actions.
Yeah. So we need that. But I think in this stage, there are many people now activists and have sound ideas and attempts to develop certain ways and means and procedures and suggestions like Jalaluddin Patel and so on. They should be meeting more frequently. Yes, we are meeting intellectually by these writing and discussion, but meeting face to face from time to time in various occasions, conferences is a very good idea. And inviting each other, for example, in the broadcast and things like that, the cross-fertilization, which is starting to increase more and more and more, as you see.
Mm-hmm.
But it should become much more. And one of the barakas of Gaza is that made that almost like put things forcefully on the table and put the other side on the corner. The other side is completely cornered. It's completely cornered.
I also had a discussion with somebody from one of the prominent groups around the idea of red lines, having a document or a working document around red lines, things that everyone would agree on. And I think one of the recent videos with Sheikh Asrar actually did mention something similar to that as well. But that was kind of more around what defines a Muslim and referring to things like Aqidah Dahawiyah. And the most open-minded of all of them was Yasser Qadhi as well, in terms of he has this approach, which is you're going to have a working relationship with people, even you don't agree with, as long as it's absolutely, you have the fundamentals agreed with. But anyways, it's another discussion, but inshallah, this will be, it's a good little, this is a good little opening gambit. I think from our part, we'll continue to pump out ideologically strong and sound material. Inshallah, we'll be starting new halakas as well on Tawheed, Hakimiyyat Tawheed, which will go through these fundamental points in the new year, and those will be published online. Anyone who's watching, please do watch, subscribe, and question as well. If you have any avenues to facilitate discussions in a wider context, email us on email address, which will be attached to the description. And we can facilitate behind the doors discussion as well, face to face or over Zoom or whatever you may like. Because these are all essential issues, and I think the walk away from this is we know what's prohibited in terms of general elections and legislation for Kufr parties, but there is an open area around independence. And now then there's the question around what is most effective and how we can proceed using our resources as best as possible, and not necessarily using a reactionary punitive measure, looking long term. Yeah,
that's required, inshallah. We're getting there bit by bit. We can accelerate if there's more cooperation and more willingness to read and analyze and counteract and react and go deeper a little bit. And don't underestimate the common Muslims. Many people say these are very deep and complicated issues. It's not true. The common Muslim will understand that very straightforward and simple. Like, for example, when after the invasion of Iraq, the Iraqi resistance started several months later, 3-4 months later, much earlier than many people expected. They expected to 2 or 3 years without any reaction. It was miraculous that started. And then they were punishing the Americans, destroying them, roadside bombs, etc. And interviews with the simple Muslims like the bus drivers in Egypt and so on, their points of view, this is a legitimate jihad, and these are mujahid, we should support them at least with dua and so on. That's with the common people. If you ask the mashayikh, they would hedge and look what the government is saying, and yeah, you see, the common Muslim is much better than their intellectuals. With intellectual encompasses journalists, encompasses mashayikh and so on. Most of these are unfortunately munafiq and hypocrites, unfortunately. While the common Muslims have barely any munafiq under them. They may have simple-minded people, maybe people with sin and shortcomings, but not munafiq, kafir, like in the scholarship and the intellectual. We are suffering, like in the West, to talk about the treachery of the intellectual. That's the treachery of mashayikh, including also Muslim intellectual, which is the mashayikh, but also journalist and whatever can be called intellectual. The treachery and the shortcomings is there, not in the common public. Hold to your common public, to the simple people. They are the source of Islam. That's there, not this leadership.